Very much looking to talking to all of you. I'm guessing most of you are international students hoping to study in the United States. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Mandy Fierbacher. I am a former consular officer, and I guess you guys know us as visa officer with the Department of State. And I worked as a consular officer for over 7 years with the State Department. So I've interviewed probably over 100,000 visa applicants, lots of them students. So I pretty much know everything about the student visa process, the student visa experience. And so today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about expert visa interview preparation and how you can make sure that you are the most prepared for that U.S. visa interview, because I completely understand it can be a very stressful process, and especially if you've never done it before and it's the first time you're talking to a U.S. immigration official through that window, which apparently is bulletproof glass, it could be a little bit scary. So I completely understand where you're coming from. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a short presentation with you about this process. And so just bear with me. Okay, guys, hopefully you can see my presentation. So what we're going to talk today about is expert visa interview preparation. How do you make sure that you are the most prepared possible for your U.S. visa interview? What I find is that a lot of people don't actually understand the process before they go into it. You know, maybe they think, hey, you know, you just stand in line, you get an appointment, you go in. But as somebody who has actually worked behind the visa window, you know, there's actually a lot of important things that you should know about before you go into this process, mostly because it does carry a lot of weight in whether or not you actually get to go to the U.S., you know, if you get approved a visa, or if you get denied, it goes on your visa record. So some of these things, it's just important to get right before the very first time that you go. And so my name's Mandy Fierbacher. As I mentioned, I'm a former U.S. diplomat, former consular officer, and I'm also a U.S. immigration attorney. So I have a lot of experience on both sides of the window. I interviewed so many visa applicants, but I also have worked with a lot of clients, helping them prepare for the U.S. visa interview process. And so just a little bit about me. My first assignment with the State Department was to be a consular officer, visa officer at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, China. So I did that for 2 years. And after that, I worked at the U.S. consulate in Matamoros, Mexico, near the border, which was very interesting. There are a lot of similarities between how visas are decided, even if you're applying in a different country. So it was kind of interesting for me to see the differences between China and Mexico. And then I spent my final 2 years, again, working as a consular officer, a U.S. vice consul at the U.S. consulate in Hong Kong. And so during my time in Hong Kong, I actually spent some time managing the immigrant visa or the green card unit. And so know a lot about immigrant visas as well. And also worked in American Citizen Services, so helping Americans abroad. It was a lot of fun for me. I really loved my career as a U.S. diplomat. You know, for other reasons, I decided to leave the government. And when I left at the end of 2018, I started my own law practice, practicing immigration law, and really found out that, you know, what I'm really good at is helping clients prepare for this U.S. Visa interview process. And so finally, I am the Executive Vice President of Argo, which I'm really excited to tell you guys a little bit more about, but we are basically the first company in the world that is made up entirely of U.S. visa officers who have worked for the Department of State at embassies and consulates around the world. So we have an amazing team of people. Currently, we have 26 officers, and they have worked in Brazil, in India, in China, in Canada, in Nigeria, in Nicaragua, in Pakistan. I mean, so many different locations, and we have such insider's knowledge about exactly how consular officers make these decisions, whether to approve or deny someone's visa. So it's a very exciting venture, and I'm excited to see how we can help you guys out as well. So this is a picture of me and my husband actually in front of the US Embassy in Beijing. So if anybody is tuning in from China, this is probably very familiar to you. You can see this through the fence. And also just wanted to share this fun picture because one of my favorite parts as a US diplomat is when you worked overseas, generally really important figures come through the embassy. They take the time specifically to meet the diplomats who are working on the ground. And so my husband and I had the great pleasure of meeting former Vice President Joe Biden, who is now currently running for US President. He's a very nice guy, really enjoyed the meeting, very kind, very humble. And so it was a really awesome opportunity for us. And so let's now talk a little bit about the US visa interview process. I mean, why do people have problems with the US interview? Most people think like, oh, if I just go in and I just, unprepared and, just answering questions, I'll be fine. But that's not actually true. And so I'll go through some reasons why. The first is that, you're probably going to be very nervous and you're going to be unprepared because nobody has expertise on the process. Everybody hears stories online, on internet forums, or maybe from their cousin or their aunt who applied, but everybody's situation is a little bit different. And so you're going to be evaluated by the consular officer on the merits of your own personal situation and not, because somebody says, oh, if you say this, you'll get your visa. That's actually a really good way to get your visa denied is if you memorize things to say or hear from other people what you should say. It's a really, really bad idea. So that's why it's important to be prepared for your own personal situation. So something else that many people don't really realize is that you actually cannot rely on your documents. I have had so many clients come to me and they bring in a stack of documents this thick and they're like, yeah, I'm just going to go in, I'm going to shove everything through the window and I'll be fine because the consular officer will just read the papers in front of him. That's probably not true. So actually, as consular officers, what I know is that we hate looking at documents. We don't rely on documents. We know that documents can be faked and that, at the embassy where I worked and the consulates where I worked, you could just walk out on the street corner and just buy, whatever you need, bank statements, anything. And so that's why consular officers generally tend not to look at your paperwork. So if you're someone who has been refused a US visa in the past and you're confused and you're like, you know what, I tried to give them my papers, they wouldn't look at them, that's why. We know they can be faked. And so what we really rely on is the interview itself. We want to see how you answer your questions. We want to know, are you prepared? Are you confident? All of these things are really, really important and much more important than any document that you can bring us. Finally, visa officers are overworked and we have limited information. This is absolutely true. So when I worked at the US Embassy in Beijing, China, I would regularly interview between 100 to 200 visa applicants a day. That's a lot of people that I have to talk to, and each interview is going to be very short, probably 2 to 3 minutes at the most. And so because we get very tired of talking to so many people, we get very cranky. You really want to know how best to prepare for your interview so that you make it easy on us to approve your visa and to not make it so hard. And, a couple examples are when people would give us one-word answers and it was so hard to actually get to the bottom of what we're trying to get to know. So this is another good reason that just to get rid of any doubts that you may have. It's good to work with somebody who has expertise on the visa interview process so that you can make sure you get an A++ on your visa interview, have no problems, go to the United States, achieve your dreams, achieve your studies. And so this is really the best way to do it. There are also language and cultural barriers because, American consular officers are going overseas to all of these foreign countries to do visa interviews with local communities that live there. We do get language training. That's one of the great things about our job is usually we actually get to learn a foreign language before we move overseas and do these interviews. But unfortunately, our language studies are usually for a short period of time. Before I moved to Mexico, I had 6 months to learn Spanish, and I can speak Spanish, but probably not in the same way that someone who grew up in a Spanish-speaking country can speak Spanish. So it's really important to understand that there could be cultural and language barriers, and that's something that you want to be aware of going into your visa interview. And the stakes are really high, even though it's only a 2 to 3 minute visa interview. Once you do end up having a problem, it becomes a really big problem because this consular officer has made a decision on your case. If it's a bad decision, you're not really able to change their minds on the spot. The only thing that you can do is try to reapply next time, but it probably is going to be more difficult to get your visa approved the next time. And the stakes are high because if you want any sort of future in the United States, whether you want to go to study for 4 years at a university or you just want to go on a dream vacation to Disneyland, if you don't do this interview right, if you don't handle it properly, you might end up not having a chance to go. And so this is really why we created Argo, is because anybody who has done my job and has been a visa officer working behind that window, interviewing visa applicants, has realized there's just so much miscommunication out there, misinformation, and we've had so many people that we've had to deny at the window because they would tell us, like, after we deny them, they would say, oh, I wish, I didn't say that. It was just that my cousin told me to say this, and that means I would get my visa. Or, oh, I read on the internet that as long as I say these 4 things, that means I'll get, the visa. And that's just simply not true. And so for people who have been former consular officers like us, we started Argo because we really wanted to help clients understand this process, how to make sure that they have no issues, how to get a consular officer to listen to your situation. And that's really what we set out to do. And we're very excited about it and very passionate about it. And so what is something that would be very helpful if you were to work with Argo? And just to give you a little bit of background, working with Argo means you would sign up through our video conference platform on the internet. It's very simple. Anybody who has an internet connection can do it. And you would sign up for a 30-minute one-on-one consultation with a former consular officer. But why would you choose Argo? Let's look at some of the reasons. First, to tell you some of the things that we wish you could have told you as consular officers, because we have very strict guidelines when we're visa officers. There are a lot of things that we're not allowed to tell you, like why we refused your visa. And now that we no longer work for the government, we can give you some insights as to why your visa has been refused. And even though we're not, accessing government computers or anything like that, we have so much experience. I mean, every Argo officer has interviewed at least 10,000 visa applicants, and we've seen every type of case. It's very easy for when a client comes to me and asks me, oh, well, this is what happened. I don't know why I was refused a visa. When they describe the situation, I usually have a very good idea of why they were refused. Number 2 is help you prevent language and cultural miscommunications. So what Argo can do for you is help you understand the mindset of an American visa officer and why it's important to answer questions as accurately as possible in a way that an American officer would understand. And finally, we just really want to help you succeed at the most important interview of your life. You know, it's an imperfect process, the visa interview process, and it's a very short amount of time. You're nervous, but we think that with our help, you can absolutely prepare and just know that you have nothing to worry about going into your visa interview. And so, as I mentioned, it is online, and it's a very smart platform. I'm super excited about it. But basically what it does is it connects people who are applying for US visas with former consular officers. And the system is very smart. It's going to try to match you with a consular officer who has worked in the country where you are applying. Of course, all of us consular officers have a ton of experience understanding how these interviews, how these visa interviews are decided. And so even if you don't get somebody who has worked in the country where you're applying, it's still a very, very good experience. But the system and the platform does try to match you with the officer who is best suited for your situation. So a few things that people may not know about the visa interview process. And the first is that the consular officer actually has absolute discretion in deciding whether to approve or refuse your visa. And this means that the consular officer that you're interviewing with will have the final say. Even if they make a decision that, other consular officers don't agree with, or maybe their boss will say, their supervisor will say, you know what, I really think you should have approved that visa. They can't, not even their boss can change the decision. So it is incredibly important that you make a good presentation and that you present yourself well to the consular officer. Number two, and you may already know this, is that once you have been refused a visa, it is more difficult the next time to have your visa approved, because every time we interview you, we take notes. A lot of times you think that we're not even looking at you. We're so busy typing into our computer. And so there's notes from every visa interview that the next consular officer who interviews you will be able to have access to and will be able to review. So it is more difficult. But I have to tell you guys, I have worked with clients who have been refused visas 5, 6, 7 times. And it was still very helpful to have a consultation with one of our Argo officers so they understand why they were refused. Is there a chance? What are some things that they can do? And on a personal level, as a former visa officer, I have definitely, somebody will come to my window, they've been refused 6 or 7 times, and I have actually changed the decision on that visa and decided to approve their visa. It's not often that I did that, but it does happen, so it's not hopeless. So hopefully that's something we can help you out with as well. And finally, just understand that your visa record in our systems, in the US government systems, is actually for life, or at least until you become a US citizen. And so, whether you applied for a tourist visa when you're 5 years old and you were just going with your parents to Hawaii, to when you're applying again for high school or college in the United States, all of that is on the same record. So it's so important that you make sure that there's no problems with your visa record. It's not something where, oh, you were refused once for a tourist visa. Oh, no problem. You can apply for your student visa and it's going to be super easy. They're all connected so the visa officers can see pretty much everything. And this includes immigrant visas. If your parents decide later to immigrate to the US, maybe they want to do an EB-5 visa, we can still see your record from the non-immigrant visa perspective. And so, as you guys know, the COVID pandemic has hugely impacted student visa processing this year in the United States. And, things are changing constantly. But let's just take a quick look at the timeline of what has happened. So December of last year is when COVID broke out in China. And in March of that year is when the State Department decided to suspend all routine visa services. So they stopped doing visa interviews, and it's just been a quiet few months. But thankfully, last month, in the middle of July, the State Department announced that it was going to do a phased resumption of routine visa services. This means that embassies and consulates around the world are opening back up. Visa appointments are being scheduled. And so, a lot of you ask me, hey, when is the embassy or when is the consulate in my home country going to start doing visa interviews? The best way to find out is to go to the U.S. Embassy or consulate website and see if they have any announcements. Just last week, we actually found out that Mission India, which includes the embassy in New Delhi and the consulates in Mumbai, Chennai, Hyderabad, Kolkata, they're resuming student visa interviews. So it's important to check your website and just make sure that you know if it's closed or when it's going to open. It's really hard to say. Okay, so just wanted to give you guys some tips on what you should bring to your visa interview. The first thing that you'll want to make sure that you bring is your recent passport, but with at least 6 months validity in it. Because actually we're not allowed to put in a visa stamp into a passport that is about to expire. So you'll just want to check your current passport, make sure that there's a lot of time left on it. And if you've ever traveled other places, maybe you have several passport books, you'll want to bring all of those with you. Next, you'll want to bring your GS-160 confirmation page, which has a barcode and a photo. You'll also want to bring your I-20 form from your school, and this year is a little bit different. The State Department is actually allowing electronic I-20 forms, whereas in the past you always had to have the hard copy. But this time, I think that they can actually be emailed to you by your school, so make sure you're in touch with your school designated school official to make sure that you have your I-20 form. And finally, you'll want to bring a recent passport photo. I know in some places in the world, if you're going in to do your fingerprint biometrics, maybe you'll take care of the photo that way. It's a little bit different depending on which country you're applying in. So just double check your embassy or consulate website for the requirements. And finally, I put in this ... at the very bottom because you'll want to bring other documentation. For example, if your parents are paying for your school tuition, you'll probably want to bring in some bank statements that show, that your parents have the ability to pay for the tuition. I know a few slides back, I mentioned, hey, consular officers don't like to look at documents. We don't look at things, that you put through the window, but sometimes we do. And so I think it's important to be over-prepared and make sure that you bring in all of this documentation. I wouldn't put everything through the window, but at the very least, if a consular officer wants to look at something like paperwork from your parents, where they work, bank documents, your loan paperwork, then at least you have it and you don't have to have your case put on pending status for you to go home and get the documents. It's always good to make sure you have everything with you, even if the consular officer ends up not looking at it, because if they do want to see it and you don't have it, it could be a problem. Okay, so just a few tips for your U.S. visa interview. So first, you'll want to work with your school to understand all of the rules. They have changed a little bit this year because of the pandemic. And so, work with your school. They usually have the most up-to-date information about what you can and can't do. For example, if you're a brand new student, but your classes are all going to be online for fall semester, you probably will not be able to get a visa based on new regulations. So there's a lot of rules like that out there, so just check with your school. Next is to check to see if visa appointments are open, where you are applying. And so sometimes you may have no news, which means that the embassy and consulate in your home country is still closed. But I would check every couple of days just to see if there's announcements of when things are starting up. Next is just how important this visa interview is. So you really want to prepare with the experts, which is Argo, because we're the only company with officers who have worked as consular officers, we used to have weekly meetings about how we make decisions on these cases. Have we seen any weird visa trends? What are some fraud trends that are going on? We know everything about how it works in the consular section, how consular officers make the decisions. So work with us to make sure that you're the most prepared possible, and we'll help you understand what the strengths and weaknesses of your case are. And if you work with the experts, one of the best things about working with Argo is that then you can go into your visa interview being very confident, knowing exactly what to expect, because confidence is so important in and of itself during the visa interview. It will put the consular officer at ease and make them understand that this is what you're prepared. You're ready to go to the U.S. and study. So I did want to mention, recently there have been some visa revocations going around. This is specific to students in India. There was, a few thousand student visas or employment-based visas that were revoked because of paying for OPT training or pre-employment training. And here's how we can help. We can help you understand. If you're in this situation, come talk to us, because we can help you understand your situation from the perspective of a visa officer and what can be done. We can help you best present your case to the visa officer at your interview, even if they end up, having to review it some more and putting it under administrative processing, which is what 221G means. And finally, have your best chance for success at your next interview, because if you've had as serious of an issue as a visa revocation, it is very important to handle your next visa interview properly so that you can minimize damage. And so I just wanted to share with you guys, this is actually a quote from one of our Argo officers recently. She worked at the U.S. consulate in Mumbai, India. And I'm just going to read this to you because I thought it was so great of a quote. But she adjudicated or interviewed over 20,000 visa applicants in India, and she often saw applicants who were not prepared or had received misinformation about the visa process from family, friends, or the internet. And she says this sometimes led to visas being denied because they weren't able to articulate their qualifications for a visa. So preparing for your visa interview with Argo will allow you to understand the mindset of a consular officer, the visa decisions going on behind the window, and give you the best possible chance for succeeding with your visa application, which is always the most important thing. And then also, this is data straight from the Department of State's website, which is that in the last 5 years, actually, we're not even looking at 2020 because 2020 is so crazy, but there has been a steady decline of student visas being issued. So it's more important than ever, especially in this climate under this administration, to make sure that you know what to expect and how best to prepare. And so I am actually going to stop sharing for a second so I can answer all of your questions. So let's see what questions there are. I'm so sorry, I actually cannot see any questions. This is really interesting. Okay, you guys, give me just a second. Okay, let's see. So we have some notifications that will hopefully show what the comments and the questions are. Thank you guys for bearing with me. Okay, hang on just a second, guys. Okay, I see a lot of highs. Hi to everyone. Okay, so I don't see any questions right now, which is fine. I'm glad that hopefully my presentation has been helpful to you guys. I'm going to actually reshare my screen, and I'll just finish up the console. I'll finish up the presentation really quickly. If you guys do end up having any questions, feel free to comment on Facebook. I will try to answer them at a later time or have them sent to me, and hopefully can be helpful to your specific questions. So one other thing I wanted to mention is do join Argo's Facebook group. You can find us by searching for Argo Visa. I regularly post new videos for tips for the visa interview process and also insights. So I would love to see you there. And so here is a map of where all of our consular officers, our Argo officers, have worked around the world. As you can see, we're pretty much everywhere, Canada, India, Brazil. And so we really hope that we can help you be successful at your visa interview. We currently have 26 officers. Like I mentioned, we speak 10 different languages, including Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin. And if you add up all of our experience together, we have over 9 decades of experience. And we're the experts on the US visa interview process. And so if you might be thinking to yourself, hey, I have a family member or a friend I know that's not applying for a student visa. They're applying for an employment-based visa, an H-1B or an E-2 or an L. Is that something that Argo can help with? Absolutely. We do lots of different visa categories. We have so much experience with every visa category, so not just student visas. And so finally, what I want to share with you really quickly is we actually have a special Argo rate, a discount for Study USA clients and our webinar viewers. So I've put up a QR code, and if you scan this on your phone, it'll take you directly to our Argo process where you can put in your name and sign up for a consultation with one of our former consular officers. And it's at actually a huge discount to what is our public rate. If you were to go straight to our website, www.argovisa.com, it's a much higher rate. So we do have a special rate for our Study USA clients. And hopefully we will see you soon. We'll be able to do our one-on-one consultation. All right, guys. So anyways, thank you so much for joining us for this presentation. It was a lot of fun to be able to speak to all of you. And I'm glad that you were able to take time out of your day to join us. Please visit us at www.argovisa.com or join our Facebook group, Argo Visa, or watch out for more updates from Study in the USA, because we do have discounts for our special partners. And I hope that we'll be able to help you be successful and not worry about the visa interview process so that you can go on to the United States and achieve all of your dreams and aspirations. So I thank you very, very much for spending your morning with me, or your evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you so much, and see you guys next time.